sure you won't change your mind about this?
Uh-huh.
This belongs to me and so do my lips. I don't see any difference.
Oh, I do.
My husband said, if you want to make a career, I think you should cut your nose.
What if I told you that some of Hollywood's most iconic stars weren't just acting on screen? They were acting in real life, too. In the golden age of Hollywood, it wasn't enough to be talented or beautiful. You had to fit the image, even if that meant lying about who you were and how old you were. From shaving off a few years to pretending they were older just to land mature roles, actors did whatever it took to survive in a town obsessed with youth, beauty, and perfection. Studios rewrote birth certificates, invented glamorous backstories, and hid anything that didn't match the fantasy. Because in Hollywood, your real age could cost you a career. Today, we're revealing the truth behind the legends, the 20 golden age actors who faked their age to make it big. Some did it to stay forever young, others to escape a difficult past, and a few, well, they never stopped pretending. So, which stars were living a lie? And how far did they go to protect Hollywood's biggest secret? Stay tuned, because this is the side of fame they never wanted you to see. Merl Oberon, the woman who hid her heritage and her birth date. In Hollywood's golden age, beauty alone wasn't enough. You had to fit the story studios wanted to sell. For Merl Oberon, that meant erasing not just a few years off her age, but an entire identity. Born in 1911 in Bombay, India, Oberon was of Anglo-Indian and Tamil descent, something that would have ended her career before it began in a deeply racist industry. So, under studio pressure, she rewrote her life. Suddenly, Merl wasn't a mixed-race girl from Kolkata. She was a refined British aristocrat, born in Tasmania. Her real age? Hidden beneath layers of lies. The press believed she was years younger, a youthful beauty with a mysterious past. Even her own mother traveled with her disguised as a maid to maintain appearances. Oberon carried this secret until her death in 1979. Only after did the truth emerge, a reminder that in old Hollywood, survival often meant becoming someone else entirely. And Merl wasn't alone. Another starlet perfected the art of reinvention, turning hardship into high society and shaving years off along the way. Enter Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford, reinventing from hardship to Hollywood heiress. When Joan Crawford appeared on screen, she was the embodiment of glamour and grace. But behind the velvet gowns and sharp cheekbones was Lucille LeSueur, a girl born into poverty in 1904, though Crawford would claim otherwise. As roles demanded youthful elegance, Crawford began trimming years off her age. Studio bios painted her as younger, refined, and educated in elite schools, far from the truth of waitressing jobs and family struggles in Texas. Hollywood loved the fantasy, and so did Crawford. She once said, "I never had a childhood, I had a career." And part of that career was keeping her real birth year buried beneath layers of studio-approved fiction. But Crawford's age wasn't the only thing being edited in Tinseltown. The next star would swap oil fields for tuxedos, all while pretending he wasn't getting older. Because Clark Gable didn't just fake charm, he faked his age, too. Clark Gable, the steelworker who aged backwards. Known as the King of Hollywood, Clark Gable wasn't born into royalty. He was born in 1901 in small-town Ohio. But by the time MGM was done with him, Gable wasn't just younger. He was reborn as the ultimate leading man. To appeal to younger audiences, Gable and his studio occasionally blurred his real age, tweaking dates in interviews and press kits. Gone was the image of a factory worker covered in grease. In its place, a polished, ageless icon with a deep voice and perfect posture, thanks to years of coaching and reinvention. "The only reason they call me king," Gable once joked, "is because I worked like a dog to seem effortless." But while Gable's age quietly shifted on paper, another Hollywood heartthrob was undergoing a far more dramatic transformation, one that erased not just his years, but his entire identity. Meet Rock Hudson, the man built by Hollywood. Rock Hudson, from truck driver to timeless heartthrob. When Rock Hudson burst onto the scene, he was the picture of youthful masculinity. Tall, handsome, and seemingly born to be a star. But behind the name was Roy Harold Scherer Jr., a shy truck driver from Illinois who arrived in Hollywood in his 20s. Studios weren't interested in Roy. They needed Rock, younger, stronger, and endlessly desirable. His real age was quietly adjusted, making him seem fresh-faced and ready for romantic leads well into his 40s. Hudson's life became a carefully crafted illusion, with every interview reinforcing the myth of the ageless all-American bachelor. "You've got to play the part off-screen, too," Haight once admitted to a close friend. But Rock wasn't the only one perfecting the art of timelessness. The next star made his entire career out of being the man every man wanted to be, forever stuck at the perfect age. Because Carrie Grant wasn't born smooth, he invented himself year by year. Carrie Grant, Archibald Leach's ageless transformation. No one embodied sophistication like Carrie Grant. But behind that tailored suit was Archibald Leach, born in 1904 in Bristol, England. Hollywood, however, preferred its leading men ageless and mysterious. So Grant played along. Throughout his career, his public age seemed frozen, always mid-30s, regardless of the passing years. Studio press releases blurred his real birth date, and Grant himself avoided correcting the record. He once famously said, "Everybody wants to be Cary Grant. Even I want to be Cary Grant." It was a rare glimpse into the pressure of living up to a persona crafted not just by charm, but by carefully hiding time itself. As younger actors emerged, Grant's eternal youth kept him in the spotlight longer than most. But in Hollywood, no one could outrun time forever. And while Grant polished his image to perfection, another starlet would take drastic steps, changing not only her age, but her very appearance, to survive in a town obsessed with youth. Next up, Rita Hayworth's painful path to becoming Hollywood's eternal love goddess. Rita Hayworth, dyeing hair, changing dates. When you think of Rita Hayworth, you picture the ultimate Hollywood bombshell: fiery red hair, sultry eyes, and the title of the love goddess. But behind that glamorous image was Margarita Carmen Cancino, a young woman who didn't just change her name, she changed everything, including her age. Born in 1918, Hayworth's official birth year became a flexible number in Hollywood's hands. Sometimes it was 1919, other times 1921, whatever suited the narrative of eternal youth. Yet, it wasn't just about subtracting a few years. Hollywood demanded she erase her Spanish heritage too. Studio executives believed Margarita Cancino sounded too ethnic for leading roles. So they anglicized her name, forced her through painful electrolysis treatments to raise her hairline, and lightened her hair to that signature red. Alongside her physical transformation came the manipulation of her age, because a younger, more American-looking actress was easier to sell. Hayworth played along, knowing that questioning the system meant risking everything. "Men go to bed with Gilda," she once said, referencing her most famous role, "but they wake up with me." A subtle reminder that behind the fantasy was a woman molded by Hollywood's impossible standards. As the years passed, Rita's true age became a whispered secret in industry circles. But by then, it didn't matter. The myth had overtaken reality. She was trapped in the image they created, forever expected to look like the youthful starlet they introduced to the world. But Hworth wasn't the only star who learned that, in Hollywood, a carefully altered age could open doors. The next actor knew exactly how to shave off years and a few letters to turn a Bronx kid into a heartthrob. Because Tony Curtis didn't just fake his age, he faked his way into stardom. Tony Curtis, the Bronx kid who grew younger. Before he was Tony Curtis, he was Bernard Schwartz, born in 1925 to Hungarian Jewish immigrants in the Bronx. A tough upbringing, a thick New York accent, and a name that screamed anything but Hollywood leading man, Bernie knew he had work to do. So when opportunity knocked, Bernard Schwartz vanished. In his place stood Tony Curtis, a name smoother than silk and far more marketable. But Curtis didn't stop at changing his name. He also adjusted his age. Some press clippings listed him as being born in 1926 or even 1927, subtly trimming the years to keep him forever in that sweet spot of youthful appeal. Hollywood wasn't looking for authenticity. It wanted fantasy. And Curtis understood that better than anyone. With his dark hair, dazzling smile, and a freshly polished accent courtesy of studio coaching, he became the poster boy for 1950s charm. Roles in swashbuckling adventures and romantic comedies poured in, with audiences none the wiser about the Bronx kid behind the curtain. "I had to hide who I was," Curtis later admitted. The studios preferred their stars to be blank canvases, easy to shape, easy to sell. But as Curtis aged, the youthful illusion became harder to maintain. By the time he delivered his career-defining performance in Sweet Smell of Success, critics finally began to see past the pretty face. Yet, the years he'd shaved off in his early days lingered in the public narrative. Tony Curtis had rewritten his past, and for a while, it worked. But while Curtis manipulated his age to fit the heartthrob mold, the next star danced around the truth, quite literally, to stay ageless. Because when Fred Astaire floated across the screen, no one dared ask how old he really was. Fred Astaire, dancing through the decades without aging. Watching Fred Astaire glide effortlessly across the dance floor, you'd think time simply didn't apply to him. And in many ways, it didn't, at least not according to Hollywood's official records. Born in 1899, Astaire's true age was quietly massaged by studios throughout his career. Some biographies listed him as being born in the early 1900s, shaving off a few years to make it seem more plausible that he could still play romantic leads opposite actresses decades younger. Astaire's ageless image wasn't just about numbers, it was about perception. Hollywood spun the tale of a natural-born dancer, a man so gifted he hardly needed to rehearse. The truth? Astaire was a relentless perfectionist who practiced until his feet bled. But that didn't fit the myth of effortless elegance. His youthful energy and slender frame helped sell the illusion, but behind the scenes, he was acutely aware of the clock ticking. Yet, he never let the public see that side. "The higher up you go," he once said, "the more mistakes you're allowed. Right at the top, if you make enough of them, it's considered to be your style." Fred Astaire kept audiences enchanted well into his 50s, still partnering with starlets half his age. Thanks to a little Hollywood math, he remained the debonair leading man far longer than most. But while Astaire's age was hidden behind dance shoes and charm, the next actress used aristocratic myths and a blurred timeline to keep her dignified image intact. Because Greer Garson wasn't just hiding her birth year, she was hiding where she was born entirely. Greer Garson, the aristocrat with a hidden timeline. To audiences, Greer Garson was the epitome of elegance, a woman seemingly plucked from Irish nobility, born to play refined heroines and wartime icons. But like many stars of the Golden Age, Garson's backstory was more fiction than fact. For years, MGM's publicity machine insisted that Garson was born in County Down, Ireland, hinting at aristocratic roots and even a connection to the legendary Scottish outlaw Rob Roy. In reality, Garson was born in London in 1904, into a middle-class family with no ties to nobility. Her age? Another carefully managed secret. Studio bios often downplayed her birth year, making her seem younger, especially as she became the face of dignified womanhood during World War II. Garson played along, offering wistful tales of Irish summers and noble lineage. "The audience believes what it wants to believe," she once remarked. By the time whispers of her true origins surfaced, Garson was already immortalized as Hollywood royalty. The myth had served its purpose, but while Garson leaned into a fabricated past, the next starlet was all about softening the harsh realities of her upbringing, trimming both her story and her age to fit Hollywood's idea of perfection. Because Sophia Loren didn't just survive war-torn Italy, she survived Hollywood's obsession with youth. Sophia Loren, the starlet who softened the edges. When Sophia Loren arrived in Hollywood, she was introduced as a goddess, a vision of European beauty and sophistication. But behind the designer gowns and flawless poise was a young woman who had fought her way out of poverty in Naples. Born in 1934, Loren's age became a flexible detail in early press reports. Some suggested she was born a few years later, making her rise to fame seem even more miraculous. A teenager turned global icon overnight. Studios erased the darker chapters of her childhood. The bombings, the hunger, the nights spent hiding in train tunnels during World War II. Instead, they crafted a narrative of effortless grace, as if Loren had been destined for stardom from birth. Her name was changed, her accent softened, and her age blurred, all to fit Hollywood's fantasy of timeless allure. Yet, despite the reinvention, Loren never truly forgot her roots. "I'm just a girl from Naples," she often reminded interviewers, grounding herself in a truth the studios preferred to ignore. As Loren's career flourished, so did the myth. A myth built, like so many others, on carefully hidden numbers. And speaking of legends built on fantasy, the next star didn't just fake his age. He built an entire life story filled with adventure, danger, and just enough lies to keep Hollywood hooked. Because when Errol Flynn told his tale, no one cared how old he really was, as long as it sounded exciting. Errol Flynn, adventurer, actor, and age manipulator. When Errol Flynn swaggered onto the silver screen, audiences believed they were watching a real-life swashbuckler, a man who lived as boldly as the heroes he played. But behind the tales of sword fights and high-seas adventures was a carefully crafted illusion, right down to his birth year. Flynn was born in 1909 in Tasmania, but depending on which studio bio you read, he might have been born in 1910 or 1911. Those subtle shifts weren't accidents. They were designed to keep him perpetually youthful, the dashing rogue forever in his prime. Flynn himself wasn't shy about embellishing his life story. He claimed to have wrestled crocodiles, mined for gold, and lived as a fearless plantation overseer before Hollywood discovered him. The truth? His time in Papua New Guinea was far less glamorous, filled with odd jobs and staged stunts to impress the right people. Warner Brothers seized on Flynn's charisma and blurred background, turning him into the fate of adventure. And as he aged, the studio and Flynn quietly adjusted the numbers to keep him fit for roles like Robin Hood and Captain Blood. No one wanted to imagine their favorite swashbuckler creeping into his 40s. Flynn later confessed in his autobiography, "My wicked, wicked ways," that much of his legend was smoke and mirrors. But by then, it didn't matter. The world had already bought the fantasy. Yet while Flynn's falsehoods were wrapped in heroism, the next star was molded into a very different kind of illusion. The clean-cut boy next door, forever young and forever hiding. Because Tab Hunter wasn't just playing a role on screen, his entire life was scripted by Hollywood. Tab Hunter built to be the perfect age. In the 1950s, Tab Hunter was the golden boy of Hollywood, blonde, blue-eyed, and the embodiment of wholesome masculinity. But Arthur Andrew Kelm, the real man behind the stage name, was a far cry from the studio-manufactured heartthrob, and part of that transformation included shaving years off his birth date. Born in 1931, Hunter found his age quietly tweaked in press releases, often listed as being a few years younger to maintain his boyish charm. After all, Hollywood wanted its teen idols to stay teens, even if they were well into their 30s. Discovered by notorious agent Henry Wilson, the same man who reinvented Rock Hudson, Tab Hunter was given not just a new name, but a completely fabricated persona. Fake romances with starlets like Natalie Wood filled gossip columns, reinforcing his image as the all-American straight arrow. But behind the scenes, Hunter lived in constant fear, not just of aging out of his roles, but of being exposed in an era where being gay could end a career overnight. "I was living a double life," Hunter later admitted in his candid memoir, Tab Hunter Confidential. "The age lies, the fake relationships. It was all part of surviving Hollywood's rigid expectations." As his youthful glow faded, so did the studio's interest. Yet, Hunter's story became a testament to the pressures stars faced to be ageless, flawless, and above all, marketable. But if Tab Hunter's lies were designed to keep him young, the next actress allowed her age and identity to blur into legend, letting Hollywood craft a fiery persona that would overshadow everything else. Because Lupe Veles wasn't just acting, she was surviving a stereotype built on fantasy and fiction. Lupe Veles, the fiery starlet with a blurred past. Known as the Mexican Spitfire, Lupe Veles was Hollywood's definition of exotic passion. Loud, temperamental, and irresistibly wild. But behind that caricature was Maria Guadalupe Villalobos Veles, a woman who knew that in Hollywood, bending the truth wasn't just strategy. It was survival. Born in 1909, or was it 1910? Maybe 1912? Even Veles herself never confirmed her true age, and studios were happy to keep it ambiguous. The younger she seemed, the longer they could cast her as the fiery ingenue audiences loved. Hollywood wasn't interested in her real story, a determined actress from a modest background in Mexico fighting her way into the spotlight. Instead, they amplified every stereotype they could, trapping her in roles that screamed passion and unpredictability. Veles leaned into the image because she had little choice. "They want the Spitfire," she once joked, "so I give them fireworks." But as she aged, the roles dwindled. The persona that made her famous became a cage. Her tragic death in 1944 was sensationalized, with rumors and false stories overshadowing her legacy, including whispers about her age that persisted long after she was gone. While Veles's story was buried beneath gossip and exaggeration, the next actor became a master of disappearing, not just into characters, but into a carefully hidden past where age was just another role to play. Because Paul Muni didn't just fake his age, he erased it entirely. Paul Muni, disappearing into roles and timelines. When it came to transformation, Paul Muni was unmatched. Nicknamed the Man of 1,000 Faces, Muni could vanish into any role, and he applied that same skill to his personal life. Born Mihilel Meyer-Weissen-Freund in 1895 in what's now Ukraine, Muni arrived in Hollywood with a background in Yiddish theater and a need to assimilate. His age quietly adjusted. Press materials often shaved 10 years off, presenting him as a youthful, classically trained actor from Chicago. Muni wasn't one for publicity. He rarely gave interviews, and when he did, he kept his past vague. This mystery only fueled Hollywood's willingness to mold his narrative, keeping him ageless and enigmatic. His obsession with detail in roles like The Story of Louis Pasteur or Scarface made him a critical darling, but few knew the real man behind the makeup. Acting is not being yourself, Muni once said. It's leaving yourself behind. And that's exactly what he did, both on screen and off. But while Muni used mystery to hide his years, the next actress faced a different challenge. Being too young for the roles she was given, and forced to lie just to make her career believable. Because Lauren Bacall didn't just fake her age, Warner Brothers aged her up to make Hollywood comfortable. Lauren Bacall, a starlet too young for her roles. When Lauren Bacall made her smoldering debut opposite Humphrey Bogart in To Have and Have Not, audiences were captivated by her sultry voice and mature confidence. What they didn't know was that Bacall was only 19, far younger than the femme fatale image Hollywood projected. Warner Brothers quickly realized that Bacall's real age didn't fit the roles they had in mind. So, they aged her up in press releases, suggesting she was in her mid-20s to justify her pairing with the much older Bogart, whom she would later marry. With her deep voice, the result of vocal coaching and natural poise, no one questioned the illusion. Bacall played along, knowing that being seen as too young could ruin her chances in a town obsessed with mature glamour. "I was born with a good voice and bad timing," she once quipped. As her career blossomed, Bacall slowly reclaimed her narrative. But the early years were a balancing act, pretending to be older in an industry that, ironically, discarded women the moment they actually aged. And if Bacall was forced to grow up too fast, the next star faced the opposite fate, trapped in eternal childhood by a studio desperate to keep her forever young. Because, for Judy Garland, age wasn't just a number, it was a prison. Judy Garland, a child star forced to stay forever young. Few stars shined as brightly, or as tragically, as Judy Garland. From the moment she slipped on those ruby slippers in The Wizard of Oz, MGM controlled every aspect of her image, starting with her age. Born in 1922, Garland was 16 when she played Dorothy. But the studio marketed her as a sweet-faced 13-year-old, desperate to maintain the illusion of innocence. This wasn't just a publicity stunt. It was a calculated effort to freeze her in childhood, even as she matured. Behind the scenes, Garland was subjected to strict diets, pills to control her weight and energy, and constant reminders that growing up was not part of the plan. The studio's manipulation of her age extended into her early adulthood, making it nearly impossible for her to transition into mature roles. "They took my childhood and then sold it back to me," Garland once lamented. As the years passed, the lie unraveled. Garland struggled with the pressures of living up to a fantasy, one where she was never allowed to be her real age. or her real self. Her story wasn't just about fame. It was a cautionary tale of what happens when Hollywood demands you stay young forever.